Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining NASW for Corporate Social Work, Understanding the Future of the Profession as part of the NASW New York City 2022 Social Work Month series. And let me thank you for your patience as we figure out all of the technical things with Zoom. My name is Angelique Imani Rodriguez. I am the Manager of Community Engagement and Volunteer Initiatives with the NASW New York City chapter. And I am so proud of the Social Work Month series. This was created to provide info sessions, workshops, celebrations during Social Work Month. And the goal is to provide you with resources and information that are relevant, not just to the profession overall, but relevant to New York City social workers specifically. So on behalf of the chapter, I thank you all for supporting the programming we offer. And I hope to see you at other events of the series. I'll drop some links into the chat, the first being the Social Work Month series, so you can all see the lineup for the rest of the month and register if you're interested. Along with this link, I'll also sporadically be dropping a link for the networking forum that I encourage you all to complete. So this information from this networking forum will be shared post-event, so you can all connect with one another, engage with other social work professionals, and if you're an NASW member, you can sign up to get info on discounted professional headshots. Lastly, I'll drop the email address. You can email if you have any questions about the Social Work Month series and community engagement here at the chapter. Additionally, I do have some links from the presenters, from the panelists today that I'll also be dropping sporadically when they begin speaking. So just pay attention to the chat. Don't worry if you miss it. All of this information will be supplied via email post-event. Just make sure you get into that networking forum so you get access to that information as well. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to Erica Sandoval, LCSW, the current NASW New York City Board President and rock star and founder and CEO of Latinx in Social Work, who will be moderating and leading this event. We are so very excited and honored to have this event, and we appreciate all of the efforts of our board president, our board and volunteer leadership that supports chapter efforts. Erica, whenever you're ready.
Thanks so much, Angelique. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Social Work Month. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to another NASW chapter events. This is our second annual NASW New York City Social Work Month series, which features panels, workshops, info sessions, and celebrations so that New York social workers can connect with, learn from, and honor each other. And thank you so much to Angelique, who is the rock star and brainchild behind all of this, for all of your hard work. So today we're talking about corporate social work and understanding the future of the profession. And I've been a social worker for over a decade. And in addition to my work with NASW, as Angelique shared, I'm an entrepreneur. I recently launched my second business, Sandoval Psychotherapy Consulting, known as Sandoval Collab. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Latinx in Social Work. But I'm also a bit of a corporate social work myself. I've been vocal in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for quite a long time. And I've become a consultant for corporate clients now. I help business create workplaces that truly value their employees and help those businesses realize how they benefit from workers who feel respected. Corporate social workers recognize that employees don't leave their identities, emotions, or the rest of their life at the door when they clock in. Instead, corporate social workers encourage their companies to lean into the humanity of their workforce, whether that's through diversity, equity, and inclusion, change management, or social responsibility. So I am so thrilled to be joined by 4 leading experts on this topic who can shed light on how they're translating the ethos and skills of their social work skills into corporate fields. Our panelists today are amazing, and I know you're going to learn so much from them. We have Michelle Rojas, the Diversity, Equity, and Improvement Manager at Imperfect Foods. Joining us is also Jennifer Pelham, Change Strategist at Kaiser Permanente. We'll hear from Eva Forde, founder of Rich Social Worker, and we have Tiffany Hervas, the Director of Community Engagement and a financial social worker at Revolution Financial Management. Hello and welcome. Let's start with sharing your pronouns and more about yourself and what you do.
So, hi, my name is Eva Forde, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I, like Erica said, well, first of all, this is so great. I'm just like, I'm so excited to be here. And thanks to NASW-NYC and Erica and all my fellow panelists. But I come from the world of, social work, bachelor's in social work. Then I got a master's in international social work and did some clinical work that's led into leadership social work. And now with Rich Social Worker, I really work with social workers to repackage and value their skills for more income, greater impact, and more freedom. And we do this by creating coaching and consulting programs and using your own interests and what aligns with you as a social worker. So I come to this forum kind of bringing that expertise of entrepreneurship and working with social workers to play on a bigger platform. So that's me.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Pelham, and I'm from New York. I live in California now, moving back to the great state of New York in a few months. Yeah, I've been a social worker for a long time, BSW, MSW, was always interested. I focused on macro and leadership and was in some traditional fields for a while. And then, yeah, I moved to corporate social work in 2008. And I've had just such a really amazing time in identifying as a social worker. And I'm here with my co-founder, Michelle. We started the Corporate Social Work Collective, and I can't wait to tell you more about that.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Rojas. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm also an MSW, BSW. My mom's a social worker. I think I'm one of those rare people who never really questioned what I wanted to do when I grew up. It's always social work. And the beauty of that is, I started my career very traditionally working in case management and child welfare, ended up getting my MSW and pivoted into social enterprises, really this concept of merging business with social impact and social work. And that really opened up my eyes to the versatility and flexibility of social work. And also the fact that the world needs us in a lot of non-traditional spaces, especially in the corporate world. So like Jennifer mentioned, we've realized that there's a need for the social work profession to really identify and lean into corporate social work. So we've created a collective to support social workers, students, and really anyone who wants to learn more and get involved in corporate social work. I'm currently the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager at Imperfect Foods, and we'll also be pivoting to a new role in a few weeks at a mental health care startup in New York City. And I'm based in Denver, but we'll also most likely be moving back to the great city of New York in a few months. And I'm super excited to be here today. Thank you.
Congratulations. I can't wait to officially meet you.
Yeah, same, likewise.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Hervas. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the financial social worker and director of community engagement at Revolution Financial Management. To everybody here, happy Social Work Month. This is beautiful. This is such a beautiful opportunity to be here with you all. So what is it that I do? If you've never heard of a financial social worker, which neither had I not even stumbled upon this field, but I work within the financial industry, very corporate, right? And to be in this industry with a social work perspective, with a holistic perspective, and also a trauma-informed approach, it's so needed, the work that we do, or the work that I do as well. And so just shedding a little bit more light in the different areas of social work and how many different ways a social worker can be in different communities and do what we love to do, is help people.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. Thank you for all of you being here and sharing your skills. I'm going to start with Jennifer. So what is corporate social work and what led you to this path?
So, for us at the collective, it's any type of macro social work that you're doing outside of maybe the nonprofit sector. you know, maybe you're in human resources, you're in career development. It's really, you know, in the business setting, but still doing work from, you know, a human-centered approach with, you know, people in mind all the time. And what led me is, you know, like I said, my background, it was in macro, and I found myself actually in a very clinical position, and you know, realized that there were parts of it that I loved, but that it was definitely not for me. And that is when I went to IBM, and I never thought that I would end up there. It just kind of worked out, and that I found a position in career development, and like the rest has been history. I loved it. I became a mentoring expert. So I got to talk to people about how to like improve their relationships in the workplace. And I was just like, this is like where I belong, right? And I love Adam Grant and his work. He's an industrial psychologist at Wharton, and you know, his whole thing is about making work not suck. And I attach myself to that mission as well. As like, we spend so much time at work, and it should be a good place, an engaging place. There should be good leaders. We should be fulfilled. And so I feel like that's my mission. And through all of my different careers, I mean, I'm currently a senior IT consultant. So I'm like social worker, HR, comms, and now I'm in IT, and I get to talk to people about connection and collaboration. So yeah, that's my story.
That's amazing. Congratulations. Eva.
And the question again, sorry.
So what
it's like so
no.
enthralled. I'm like, yes.
No, absolutely. So what is corporate social work to you, and how, and what led you to where you are today?
So I feel like everyone else on here is a real corporate social worker. I'm more of an entrepreneur that helps social workers, you know, to be recognized in the corporate space. And, you know, you don't have to, the requirement isn't necessarily that you would have had to have come, you can't talk today, from a corporate space. But just like Jennifer said, there's so many of our skills that are valuable outside of social work. And so I mentioned earlier that I, you know, started off in clinical work. That was never my passion. I'm much more of a kind of visionary leadership. And I found myself teaching in Jamaica. I lived in Jamaica for 15 years, still have a house there. I'll be back eventually. But so I was teaching social work at a university. And once you've kind of had that kind of freedom and flexibility in your schedule, it's very difficult to give it up. And not only was I teaching, but I was coordinating, and I was ended up being the president of the Social Work Association in Jamaica. And in Jamaica, it's a little different. So president, CEO, it's all the same thing. And I did that for 8 years. And so a lot of my skill set and a lot of the work that I did was helping the ministries of finance and Ministry of Education and these different governmental organizations see our value and kind of come in and train them and speak to them and work with banks and things about how, you know, the missing piece of, you know, emotional intelligence and social welfare. And so that kind of helped to lead me down this coaching path and, you know, let them know like, hey, you really need social workers. You may not understand how to use them, but I can help you do that. So corporate social work to me it starts with a recognition that your skills are leadership skills. And I think a lot of times we're trained in this amazing profession, social work, it's great. And we think, you know, social workers can do anything, but really a lot of our mindset is kind of limited because we kind of contextualize that we could do anything within a social work scope. And the truth is we can do anything within an anything scope. Wherever there are people and problems, that's where we are valued. So I think that the challenge for us is understanding the language of corporations, because it's a very different language for social workers, but understanding how to translate our value to corporations and professionals in business.
I love that you said that we can do anything, and I 100% agree with you. And just how we identify and how we transition and translate all the skills that we have into any spaces that we occupy. The theme of the year for social workers is social worker. I mean, it's exactly what we're talking about right now. So just moving to Tiffany. So Tiffany, what is corporate social work to you, and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's so funny because it's a loaded question, because sometimes when people ask me, so what do you do? I like get stuck because I've done so much and I'm still doing different things in different areas. What is corporate social work to me? The definition that Jennifer and Eva had said, anything that's macro, right? Outside of the clinical sphere, it reminds me of being in a corporate structural or systemic institution. It would be corporate to me. Also recognizing that the skills that social workers are trained or ingrained with are directly transferable into any real role that we can have, which is why we can literally say we can do anything, because we have this perspective of being in a holistic realm of seeing more than just the issue, understanding more than just that one issue that the person, individual or group is presenting. It's looking at the whole system's perspective. Corporate, how did I end up here? It's interesting because in the two jobs that I've really landed, I've landed them like in living room couches, just having conversations. So what are you up to after grad school? And I was just like, well, I'm a writer. I'm looking to write grants, and I write blog posts, whatever it is that people need me, I can do it. And so that's how I landed at my first position, writing psychological evaluations for immigration petitions, which I still do. That's also very much needed. But it also led me into seeing a little bit more of what it looks like to have a private practice. The individual that hired me, she was running her own practice on her own in Queens, and I was so inspired. I was like, wow, you're doing this by yourself. You make your own rules. Like you take naps when you feel like you need to rest. You say that you don't want to come into work if it's snowing, and that is absolutely the perspective that I have of being able to know your boundaries and work to your fullest potential, your fullest productivity. And making schedules that allow you to do just that. And also fostering that kind of work ethic and work health in the people that you train. So that's kind of like what I loved about that entrepreneur experience. And then from there, I found another opportunity in which there's people training to be financial consultants. And I was like, well, what role do I have here as a financial consultant? I had a background in finance just with my parents. They were always telling me, save a little bit, but how? Or save a little bit, but where? And so it was more in depth about teaching how to be able to save, invest, grow, become an entrepreneur, make your own schedules, make your own type of income, set your worth, and know your value. And I was very much taken back by that, because if that kind of mentality can be brought into different communities in which they don't have to rely on just the 9-to-5 or the job with benefits, and can see themselves as truly worthy and valuable, that their work can be put a price on, and that they can make their own path. It doesn't have to be the traditional path that either their family or society has told them to. Then what kind of impact would that have later on by just that education alone? So that's where I was like, yo, this is something serious, because a lot of the times that I was seeing and working with clients on a micro perspective, a lot of them couldn't afford our services. Why? Because they were expensive, right? And so what does it look like when I'm trying to help or heal or help facilitate your healing process, but you can't afford? And I can't afford to lower my prices either, because, it's a struggle out here. And so that's why I fell in love with the financial industry, and also being able to mesh it with social work. And now financial social worker, right? In the corporate world, and also standing out in some ways. How do I constantly communicate the way, or the need to be diverse, and the need to be inclusive, and how we can achieve equity intentionally? because many times in these corporate worlds, people are just going there. There's rules and regulations, practices and policies that they're just following, or compliance, whatever that they're following. But at what point do we take a pause and really state, like, it doesn't need to be this way? We're missing people at the table. People need to be visible. We need to diversify. We need to include, and including our marketing. Everything matters. Everything counts. So that's how I found myself here and loving it.
That's amazing, Tiffany. Thank you so much for sharing. Michelle, I want to start by just also asking, what led you here? And then if we can go into the next question, which is, what type of skills and experience should social workers emphasize when they're applying for corporate social work positions? So one, what led you here? And then maybe share with us some gems.
Yeah, thank you. Similar to many of the stories we've heard from our other panelists already, the theme is, I started off doing clinical, but I realized that it wasn't for me. That's me in a nutshell. However, I very much wanted to get clinical experience because that's where I was really able to fine tune my micro one-on-one people skills, essentially, being able to advocate for marginalized populations, being able to stand up in front of a judge at a petition hearing and advocating for children. Like, those are the really tough skills that were able to allow me to talk to a CEO and advocate for diversity practices, allow me to get up in front of our entire executive leadership team and say, hey, we're not hiring to the best of our abilities. We lack representation in XYZ positions. Really being able to have those difficult conversations and not be afraid. So that's kind of what led me to where I am today. Again, always knowing that I really didn't want to do micro work, but always understanding the versatility and the beauty that the social work profession provides us. I was fortunate to complete a program that was focused on social enterprise administration, really more macro. And we're seeing a movement in MSW programs of being able to provide and train students in that specific field. So from there, I landed at a social enterprise, like I mentioned in my intro, called the Hot Bread Kitchen in New York City, where we were training women from all over the world for jobs in the culinary industry. And after developing a program there, it became very apparent that, hey, we're serving a diverse population, but we as an organization don't yet have a stance when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So doing what I do best, advocating for myself and for others, I met with our leadership team and said, hey, I'd love to carve out a DEI initiative and I'd love to lead it. So as far as, there's a question in the chat, I think about, like, how do we make that pivot? Don't be afraid to advocate where you are and say, hey, I see this need. Can I get a committee or a group of people and I'll lead them to find a solution? And that's where you get experience. And that's exactly what happened with me. I was able to get that DEI experience and then pivot out of nonprofits into the corporate world. As far as the specific skills, I would say that it's a matter, like Eva said, of really understanding the corporate language. So something like, provided wraparound services for X number of youth, maybe that translates to something like, supported stakeholders with identifying X number of partnerships in the community. Being able to truly quantify your work is really important. And then also tailoring your experience to the specific job that you're applying to. It's hard to narrow down what specific skills you need in the corporate world because they're all needed. You'd be surprised how many, intelligent, strategic thinkers we have as leaders that often lack the emotional intelligence or the ability to problem solve or the ability to lead compassionately and facilitate through difficult times. That's where social workers come in. We fill those gaps and we are needed so badly. Especially in the world that we're living in today, where we're, everyone's remote, there's sense of isolation, people are struggling with their mental health. We're bombarded with instances of racial injustice in the world. We're seeing the atrocities that are occurring in Ukraine on a daily basis. We need people, we need social workers that are going to advocate for the holistic needs of people and employees at a company, whether you're in HR and change management and executive, I don't care what you do. The fact that you have a social work degree in education makes you the prime person to be able to advocate for the needs of others. So to answer your question, I don't think there's a specific, like, you need these 3 things. I think all of it, like the fact that you have this degree really positions you super well to do anything in the corporate world. And I really encourage, if you walk away from something, I hope you walk away with a lot of things from this event, but just own your degree. Don't be afraid that, oh, well, I'm a social worker, I don't know how people will perceive me. They need you. That's it, point blank, they need you.
Oh, that's incredible. I saw some nodding heads, so I'm going to go to Eva. I saw that you were nodding your head. Anything to add to that, please?
Well, first of all, I want to interview all of my panelists on my YouTube channel, Rich Social Worker, all of my fellow panelists. But yeah, I mean, one of what stood out to me about what Michelle just said, and I hope everyone heard this, is no one is giving you permission before, like they used to. You have to take it. You give yourself permission, give yourself a job, give yourself responsibility. And I saw a question in the chat about, who is this? Naomi was asking about recommendations for MSW students to get opportunities. Yeah, give yourself the opportunity, like go and say, hey, just like Michelle did, like, hey, I have this skill, I'd love to offer this, do your research on where those gaps in service are, gaps in service delivery are, just like Michelle did, and offer to fill that gap. No one is going to tell you, no, we don't want you to fill that gap. But then keep receipts. Like, hey, when I got here, you didn't have this. You didn't have all of these things that now that I'm here, there's evidence that there's been an improvement. What is this worth to you? If you feel this is valuable, let's talk about compensation. So I know this is not a career development, I suppose, conversation. I don't know that I'm qualified to do that, but definitely if you want to, be relevant, be relevant.
I love that. Keep receipts. That is amazing. No, it's so true. And I think there's so many opportunities within all the corporate spaces through affinity groups, through the corporate social responsibility sectors that a lot of corporate companies have. And we don't see ourselves in these positions sometimes because we limit ourselves with our thinking, oh, I am a social worker that should be doing X, Y, and Z, and just really opening up just don't always own the social work, proud badge, but also own all the skills that come with you and enter into those spaces, because there is so much to do and social workers are needed everywhere. So I'm going to go to Jennifer, if you can add to that just a bit and saying, so what do you think? So for students, I know that we're talking about micro and macro, and a lot of people have multiple skills that they can transition into anywhere. Tell us a little bit more about what you think the skills are that are needed to get into corporate.
Sure. Yeah. I always, in my resumes and in my discussions with recruiters, I emphasize my knowledge in human behavior and how I brought that to the table, the program management experience that I had, that I can, facilitate learnings and groups. I taught parenting classes at the addiction center I worked at, so bringing all of that, it was very interesting to recruiters. I always, people always, well, how did you make the switch? They were fascinated that I was a social worker, and I helped them make that connection by showing them all of the transferable skills that, that we do have. And like Michelle said, it's everything that we do, everything that I learned in school, in my micro direct practice jobs, were transferable. And and when I would get to the roles early on in my career, wow, you're a breath of fresh air. It's because we bring this diversity of thought, right? We don't want all HR people just to have all a business background or HR education. We need the diversity of thought. And because we come in and we're at the table and we have such this people lens, right? It's like we are advocating for the employee. HR traditionally has been very much about supporting the business and protecting the legal aspects of that business. But as a social worker, I come in and I say, well, what about the employee, right? And I want to make work a better place for this employee. And so really bringing like the human back to human resources. And I use that a lot, but it's so true. So yes, all of your skills are transferable. You do need to update your resume and learn that, you know, corporate language and, you know, how to kind of spin things and tell your story in a way that's going to be really attractive to recruiters.
I love that, the human back into human resources. That's so true. I think all of you have so many gems to drop. I feel like we can make all these quotes through social media graphics. Really, really amazing. Tiffany, I'd love to hear from you, and just to answer, you know, what types of the skills and experience do you think that social workers should really emphasize when entering into the space? And I love the fact that you have multiple skills. You said you owned it. You like, I'm a writer, you know, I'm great with finances, and this is what I'm doing. And I'm a social worker. I love that you did all that. I'd love for you to share with everyone on how they can really see themselves in a very holistic way and package themselves to really get to where they want to be.
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to conceptualize, right, in 3 different ways. I want to say one is know that you are enough. You have your degree, right? You've worked so hard just to even get that degree. All of that effort you put, that in itself is enough, right? And owning that. Somebody said, own your degree, do that. I always like to break it down to an activity, right? There's glows and grows. What areas, or sit down with yourself, tangibles, what areas do you glow in? That you know that you're stellar at, you know that you're really good at, and the things come naturally to you. What are those things? And on the other side, what are areas that you can continue to grow in, continue to improve in, right? That will help tremendously when you are in updating your resume, when you are getting it, looking at opportunity, when you are doing an elevator pitch and somebody's like, so tell me about what you do. You know exactly who you are and what you do and why you do it. The other thing I want to say is for directly transferable skills, the processes of a social worker, right, is to engage, to do an intake, to gather information, right, to assess that information, identify the needs. What is it that the client needs, or the group needs, or the institution needs? What can I do now? Let's plan. Let's put something in place. Let's see what works, what doesn't work. Let's add our interventions in at all different levels, and then come back and assess it, evaluate that. Did it work? Did it not work, right? Knowing these basic fundamentals, if you're working individual one-on-one with a client, if you're working with an institution and they're like, I want to increase my workforce. I want to increase my retainment in my workforce. How do I go about doing that? Well, what are you doing now? What can be done better? And how are we going to evaluate that, right? And it's like uncomplicating it. Right, in whatever field that you're going in whichever job or title that you're going to hold, it's always coming down to that. Take time to get to know who your audience is, who that person is who's asking for your help, and find out what exactly is the issue, what is the problem, and what can you bring to that table. Another side of it looks like, if you're looking at more entrepreneurial tracks, is market research. Who's currently out there that's doing what you're interested in doing? Right? Do some research on the people that you want to aspire to emulate. And then what do you bring to the table that might be a little bit different, that might be a little bit unique, that makes you uniquely you, that nobody else out there is doing? Sure, they're doing this, that, and the third, but are they doing this? Can they do this? Can they do it in Spanish? Can they do it in Creole, right? So a little bit of market research. And I think the last thing I wanted to leave y'all with is Google. Like, it's super simple, but honestly, like we say in Spanish, Googlealo. Just Google it. If you don't know something, it's okay. We've all been there. We're all in that growing point, right? Google it. Google it until your heart's content, and then maybe ask another person. So this is what I found, right? Because you did your research. This is what I found. Can you verify? Can you affirm? Can you validate? Can you send help? Always do that.
I think just adding on to that, I think absolutely, like I am quote unquote a subject matter expert in diversity, equity, inclusion, both because I am a woman of color, but I have this title. And I often, like, I don't know everything and often rely on Google or my peers in the space to say, hey, how are you approaching this problem? Or what are other best practices? Like leaning into the unknown. And my partner always says this, like, exposing your ignorance early on will set you up for success later on. It's really important to acknowledge when you don't know something. Adding on to that, I think I mentioned this in the chat, but do not underestimate the power of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is super duper important. It took me a while to really lean into LinkedIn. I'm at a point now where I treat it as my second form of social media and find myself just scrolling. When I was interested in pivoting into corporate social work and the DEI space, the first thing I did was search in LinkedIn DEI manager, DEI director, and just started connecting with anyone who held the DEI title. And then my second step was to message them and say, hi, my name is Michelle. I'm super interested in learning more about your career trajectory. I'm really interested in pivoting into DEI. Do you happen to have 15 or 20 minutes to chat with me? And more often than not, they would be willing. And that's how I was able to really develop my network, really was able to humanize my approach to job search, because I was then able to get in front of someone who was already doing the work that I wanted to do, make my case, advocate for the fact that social workers should be the ones leading diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And that's how I was able to land this job. And I still do it to this day, right? Your network is your net worth. Who you know is absolutely so important. And I think, LinkedIn is a tool to help you to cultivate your network. So do not underestimate it. And in fact, put it on a pedestal, because it can definitely get you jobs and opportunities.
And Michelle, on that note, I'd like to emphasize too, it's not just who you know, but it's who knows you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
the way
and what they know about you.
And what they know about, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, the way to get people to know you and recognize you, when I'm coaching, we're using the online space now. It's such an opportunity, whether you're on LinkedIn or Instagram, or if you have a website, whatever, but there's such a huge opportunity for us to showcase our expertise. And I'm just thinking about this conversation from the perspective of when I didn't know, right? And hearing people talk in about like, your skills are transferable. What does that mean? Which skills? Like, how do I transfer them? And what I would just say, if you're one of those people, like Talar is here saying, they're here because they're tired of hearing, let's face it, nobody goes into social work to get rich. Listen.
We're living
all of us.
That's not
Preach,
true.
preach. You have to preach.
Exactly. This is the hot box, right? We're going to get on our soapboxes with this, because first of all, we don't need to say that. Like, why would we even need to say, well, you're not into social work to get rich? Yeah, but money is not even the issue here. We've got skills that are valuable. And the great thing about being a social worker and going into social work and having these skills and having this heart is that the more money you make, the more people you can actually help. So let's just retire that. I'm not in it for the money. I'm not in it for the income. I'm in it for the okay. Yeah. Let's move on and let's learn how to package our skills and get paid. And then we can do all the good in the world. Okay. Yeah. Off the soapbox.
And my thing about this too, and the value of what we do, is that people skills are in such hot demand. We know that machines, that AI, they have taken a lot of jobs for those everyday kind of skills. But guess what machines can't do? They can't, read people, at least not yet, they don't have those people skills. And so we need people that understand people. And yes, like I said in the chat, I cry when I got my first 6-figure job, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I did it. Because yes, I was told that like you know, we would in school, they like ingrain it in you, like it's like some kind of, you know, like, oh, you know, you're not going to be rich, but they're like warning us because the job pays are so low, right? But no, like we don't want to accept that. It's not okay.
And that's not your fault. That's the fault of the reputation that this profession has. And I think as corporate social workers, the fact that we are in these non-traditional spaces, every single day that I'm at Imperfect Foods doing the work that I do, I'm changing the perspective that social work has. And that's exactly why we need more social workers to enter these spaces, because then social work will get the time of day that it requires, that it needs. That's where we're then able to lift, you know, direct practitioners up in their income. Like it's a trickle down effect in a way, right? Because as we're carving out new paths, we're also supporting those who want to enter these paths as well. But I feel you, Jen. I cried also when I got my first six-figure job because I have student loan debt. I'm a woman of color. My parents didn't have a fund for me to go to school. I'm still paying that off and it's not pretty. And I want to do good work in the world and be compensated competitively for it. That's where I am right now. I started off my career making 40K doing case management. And now I can very proudly say that I've quadrupled my salary. And that's, you know, I want that for everyone.
That's right. And you know what I love is that we are normalizing talking about money, because a lot of times we don't do that. We don't talk about this, and we need to, so we can elevate and amplify each other. And it's so true, as Jennifer, you said, you know, relationship skills are number one. No one can do that except a human being. And we are actually trained, and a lot of it comes natural to us. That's why we're in this field. So really thinking about that and how you promote yourself and making sure that you speak about what you need and your worth. And I love what Ava always says, and I love you. You know how I have a special place in my heart for you because you have been coaching me, and I'm so proud of that, because it's true. It's like you have to package yourself in order for a way to understand what you can bring to the table. And that is so true. So normalizing talking about money, making sure you are knowing what you're asking for, how you can show up for them. That is so important, and understanding the language. And just to get into the next question, Michelle, because you said why, you know, the importance of social workers entering into the spaces. I'd love to hear more from everyone else. Why do you think it's important for us to own our social work badge and enter into these spaces?
Yeah. I did not want to lose my identity as a social worker when I went into the corporate. I was like, no, I worked really hard. I went to school for a long time and I'm proud to be a social worker. And I want everybody to know it in, you know, all the corporate world. And I tell people, you know, and I'm giving a talk on some technology piece. I'm a social worker. I come at this from a people perspective, blah, blah, blah. And I started labeling myself as a corporate social worker, you know, a long time ago, because, you know, I'm proud of that. And we need to rewrite the narrative of what we're capable of, because the media, the TV shows just show us in such like a negative light. And we need to own this. Like there's a big marketing campaign that needs to happen. We all need to identify ourselves as social workers on LinkedIn. We all need to just shout it from the rooftops and let people know what we're capable of.
100%.
I will say this, Jennifer, absolutely. I think though, like for a lot of social workers, especially who maybe don't have the awareness that we as panelists have, I would say when you're looking for a job, it's okay to move away from looking for social work positions. Like, just like some of you have said, right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Right.
You're never going to find a corporate social work job with that title. Like, right. Yes. So yes.
And so on that note, would you also advise them to maybe reposition themselves on LinkedIn as like leadership or open to, you know, equity and diversity, or what would you say?
I think that it's important to have the slashes on LinkedIn. So on your top section that you identify yourself, or even if it's just adding your credentials to your name, if you don't want to say that you're a corporate social work, but highlight your credentials. And then you can also, like I put on that I'm a former IBMer. I think that lets people know something about me. I'm also ProSci certified change practitioner, and so like, I think we need to get comfortable with the slashes. And there's a really good book, and I'll have to look it up, but like, we're more than just one thing. And yes, it is about, educating people, because they might not know what a social worker is. So we don't want to limit that, but I don't think that we should hide from it, because how are we going to rewrite the narrative if we're not owning that part of who we are and just showing them that we're so much more.
Yeah, and to add to that, Eva, I think, I encourage everyone to do some digging, go on LinkedIn or other job boards and try to look up titles that you think would be interesting. So one title that's often transferable if you are doing case management is customer care. Not customer care, sorry. Customer care associate. No, what's
specialist?
Something like
customer
that.
success.
Customer success. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Not
I've
customer
had that
care.
title before, so absolutely.
Exactly. And it's managing the needs of customers at a corporate space. What do you do when you're a case manager? You manage the needs of your clients, and a nonprofit space is the same thing, but that's how you get your feet in the door. So I would encourage you to really look through and read between the lines. And if you feel like they're asking for something that you may or may not have, try to switch the language and translate your social work skills to the corporate world, because more often than not, they're asking for a social worker and they don't even know it.
Exactly.
Another exercise that's really helpful is look up companies and look up many companies have like a values section, and they list out what the company values are. Don't be afraid to try to find a job that's value aligned, right? I was very intentional in my job search. I knew that I didn't want to work for a bank. I didn't want to work for Facebook. And I wanted to work somewhere that I felt like I could, really pursue my values. And, you can be a corporate social worker in a space where you don't feel like you're selling your soul. It just takes time and it takes research.
The first time I heard about a happiness consultant or happiness expert was I had read the book Delivering Happiness by the CEO of Zappos. And that's another thing I would say, like, a lot of us have, we pay for education, but it's squarely within the social work realm, as opposed to also looking outside of the social work realm at conferences, business conferences, other professional development spaces, reading books that aren't necessarily about social work, but that are about, From Good to Great. That's a great book. The One Thing on how to focus down, and you'll learn some of the language that that corporations use that you will immediately be able to identify, but it's just not in your social work lexicon at the moment. And so then when organizations are asking you about your skills, you can talk to them in their language and not just in a social work language. But yeah, looking for jobs like happiness consultant, just like you were saying, Michelle, what did you just say? It's a job, customer success. Yeah, I literally was a customer success manager for like a year and a half, and it's all social work. And so, yeah, hopefully you guys are hearing everything that we're saying and taking away some gems.
I'll just jump in that I will never forget what my one of my professors said, and I took Meso community organizing in grad school to get the best of both worlds, macro and micro. And she said that you need to identify your values. You need to know what you're going to be compromising on, or what you're not willing to compromise on. And for me at that time, it was just like, I never wanted to be at a strict work schedule at a 9 to 5. I wanted to make my own hours. For me, I wanted to travel. I was looking at international social work at one point. I was like, any job that will have me moving from anywhere to anywhere, I will love, as long as I don't do home visits. For me, it was a boundary. And when you get really clear about what it is that you're seeking, do all the research, right? Look at all the job descriptions, change the wording, reframe it, speak their language, because they have softwares that pulls out anything that has their keywords in a resume. Then that's the resumes that they want to look at. They're not going to look at any others if they're not speaking the same language. So be really intentional about what you want to do and how that directly relates and can add value to the companies that you're willing to work with.
I love it. I love all of this. I think that it's so important to also note that, I think that a lot of this happened, this big need of social works throughout the pandemic. We saw how many companies have lost employees. One, first, they laid off many employees. And then two, when they were opening back up, they needed to hire employees. And then there weren't enough employees to hire because everyone got just really comfortable kind of figuring out what really worked for them. Like we had a big pause, and many times we don't realize that we can be the individuals that can go in and really tell them what they need, just like Michelle said, just like Jennifer, just like what all of you have said, based on their organization and the needs that are really apparent. And using that to our advantage is so important. I wanted to kind of get into some of the questions in the chat. Angelique, do we see any questions in the chat that we might need to address? I think there was one. Does anyone, on the panel recommend any education, any specific education? That was the most up-to-date question.
Honestly, no. Before I pivoted into corporate, I was like, do I go back to school to get an MBA? What do I do? I seriously considered it. And no, it's actually, I think, a waste of time. There's a movement right now too, I think Cornell released a DEI certification class. If you have a social work degree, you already have a DEI certification. You've learned
Absolutely.
so much about the history of the world, marginalized populations, how to support them, trauma-informed lens, systems thinking. These are all things that the corporate world needs. I strongly encourage you to just own the education that you already have. There's no need to do more. And if you do, LinkedIn, again, I feel like I should be sponsored by LinkedIn at this point.
Yeah.
They have so many free trainings that you can take by literal thought leaders in business and DEI and a variety of different topics. And the best part about it is that once you take the training, you have to take a little mini test, and then you get a badge that goes on your page that says, hey, completed this training, has this LinkedIn certificate. So if you really want to kind of further your training and education, do it for free, A, because you already have a degree, if in some cases multiple degrees, and B, try to find spaces that offer things for free, but that can also give you some type of credential that you can then, share with the world.
So
go ahead.
Please, please.
I also wanted to make a recommendation that definitely utilize your LinkedIn, but then also go that extra step and connecting with someone in a company that you might be interested in and just connect with them virtually. What has happened is that we are able to reach anyone now. Before it was, hey, can we get a cup of coffee? Now it's like, hey, can we get on a Zoom? And you're connecting with anyone across the country, anywhere that you want. And you can actually ask them, do you have a few minutes? I want to kind of just check in to see tell me about your company, an informational session with someone so you can get more of an understanding of what they do or how they do it and how they may have insight on some opportunities that may be coming their way. And networking and connecting and staying connected. Angelique, you were going.
Yeah, so I'm sifting through the chat. There's a whole lot of clapping in the office and praising the panelists here today. So again, thank you all. One of the questions that we have is, can anyone provide a few examples about quantifying D&I work? Please.
Michelle.
Yeah, this was a muscle that took me a little while to really tone and flex. I think it's really, I'll start off by saying anything you do is quantifiable. There's often this notion that social work is fluffy, and because we work with people, you can't really measure the impact of that. That is complete BS. Quantify the number of clients that you have, quantify the completion rate of their graduation. For example, one thing that I had on my resume when I was first starting off was, supported 100 youth and had a successful graduation rate of like 6 months or 90%. To a social worker, that, what does that really mean? But to someone in corporate, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. You worked with this number of people in this amount of time, you were able to complete this percentage of them. That's how people think, right? So if you work in grant writing, successfully completed X number of reports or grants that led to the successful acquisition of $1 million in funding. That's huge. That's huge. And that's kind of the impact. Instead of saying, supported the needs of youth, period. Next line, provided wraparound services to 5 youth, period. Amazing. But like, what was the outcome of that? What did that lead to? So supported the needs of 5 youth with a successful graduation rate of 100%, which then led to, I don't know, them going to college or something like that. Like, really telling that story using data and numbers. That's what I mean by quantifying it. And don't be, everything you do is quantifiable. It's just a matter of figuring out what the appropriate numbers are to that activity.
100%. And also adding just how much money is being brought into wherever you are because of the work that you're doing. I love that. And that's what we had to do a lot within our resumes, especially as you get into leadership roles, is you quantify X amount generated, $1 million of stream of income, X amount generated this. And this is everything you do is with numbers, because that's what they look at. They look at the numbers. So that is such a great point. So I have one last question. Where does corporate social workers still have room to grow? And anyone can jump in.
There's a lot of work to be done. I think, that's why we started the collective. Like, we want to bring those of us who are already in corporate spaces together, so we know that we're not alone. When I first started out, I was like, is there anybody like me out there? And there are, and we just don't know it. I think there's a lot more of us out there than we realize. So bringing us together, creating that community, and then really updating our education. It needs to happen. Like, we need to talk about these types of things. We need to encourage people to get a minor in business, or communications or criminal justice or whatever other opportunities, there are out there. We need to update our education in school.
Yeah, the curriculum really needs to change. There's a question in the chat, like, are there any specific courses in universities for corporate social work? The short answer is no, they don't use that specific term, but schools like USC and Columbia are beginning to offer and do offer like macro focus business social work classes. If you are at a school that doesn't offer that, I wouldn't be deterred. I often, when I was at Columbia, I took as many classes outside of the School of Social Work as I possibly could. So don't be afraid to get creative and reach out to your business school, reach out to your international public affairs school and see if there's classes that you can take, because that's how you really get a well-rounded view into how your social work degree can be leveraged beyond just the social work field. Yeah, that's my answer.
And so I'll answer your question, Erica, but I do want to speak to Tanisha's question. She said she's torn. She's doing her DSW. I don't know, panelists, what you all think. I might recommend, go ahead and finish your, if you've been doing a clinical concentration, do the clinical, because it can all transfer into the corporate, because you're working with individuals, even if you're working with teams. And this is something I used to do in Jamaica as well, like go into organizations, banks, insurance agencies. They're having challenges communicating with each other, and we're doing day-long events, and I'm using my clinical skills, and they're coming away crying and like, oh my God, this was so transformative. I'm like, yeah, I'm a social worker. I do this.
Because I'm a social worker, yes.
I do this in my sleep.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. Because you're never not going to use your micro skills, but where corporate social work needs to grow, I'm coming from the entrepreneurial space. I'm going to rah. And I want social workers to own their expertise, and I want you to get paid for it. So whether or not a corporation or an organization says, we want to hire you, you learn how to package your knowledge and skills. So you say, hey, I have something for you to buy. So when you're ready, here, come talk to me. I've put a system together. It's going to be 6 weeks or 6 months or a year. I know these are the problems that we're going to address. These are the tools that I'm going to give you. And this is the 4 or 5 figure amount of money you're going to pay me to help you solve your problem. Call me when you're ready. So I don't want you to have to wait for an organization to say, eeny, meeny, miny, okay, we'll pick you to work with us. I want you to say, no, you need me because I have your solution over here. So that's where I would love to see social workers grow.
I love that. I think I saw in the chat, somebody said, is there a class that's being offered in universities like this? And honestly, if there is or if there isn't, make one, right? Package it the way that you would want to, like Eva just said, package it the way that you would want to hear it, the way that people need to hear it, right? Because even if universities are having that class, you can offer it differently. Our skills as social workers, the ability to facilitate groups and include everybody in that conversation empathetically, and also be considerate or sensitive of other people's emotions in the space too. Group agreements, like all of these things are just social work skills that we were taught already in our degree. Don't second guess your degree. I also suggest don't add to the debt, right? Your degree is enough. Google is also there. Build also your social capital building your network, right? Get in touch with different peoples and different institutions or different companies and find out what they're doing. Find out if that interests you. Maybe you can find out there's a space for you. If not, make your own path. Let them know this is what I do, right? And they can decipher for themselves, like, oh, I didn't realize that we needed that, or oh, I didn't realize that need, or oh, I didn't realize that social workers could actually help and benefit my constituents or my clients or whatever the case is. Don't be afraid to market yourself. Don't be afraid to dive deep and find out what you're really good at. And this question about this clinical or corporate being torn in your doctorates, go for what you're passionate about, depending on how far along in your doctorates program you are. But find out what you're most passionate about, because that's going to be your baby, so to speak, right? What you're going to be birthing in this doctorate process. What you do after that is free reign. All the experience, like we say, is directly transferable. All of it is going to help feed and fuel yourself. Any experience that you're taking unpaid or even paid, or even conversations like this, right? Take as many notes as you can, as many gems as you can. This in itself is a class. And when you see everything through a learning perspective, everything can just build onto each other. Where can we grow in corporate social work? We just need more people. We need more people doing the work that we're doing. We need more advocates in these spaces. We need more people that are audaciously advocating for the wellness or the well-being of other individuals, and having this capitalistic mentality that it's only about the numbers and that's only what matters. Human, right? Bring the human back into human resources, the humanity of the work that is done, or the institution work that is done, needs to be centered. And so social workers are the best people to do that, but we also need more visibility, more conversations like this, and breaking that stigma of, oh, social workers don't get paid enough. Stop, please. All of you have a seat.
That's right. That's right. I love all of that and more. It's so true. Everything that has been shared. I think that we have to definitely break that stigma within ourselves first, in order for us to really walk into spaces where we may know that they were not meant for us, but we're making it because they didn't know that they needed us. Because just like I believe Jennifer put, imagine how much better the world would be if social workers were in every business.
Say
amazing, that. Right? Amazing. And I just want to kind of check in with everyone to please let everyone know how they can find you, how they can connect with you, how they can follow you. And we'll start with Jennifer.
Yes, please find us on LinkedIn. I put my personal profile, but you can follow the Corporate Social Work Collective. And Michelle just added our website. Please sign up to get our emails. We send information about new blog posts and events. So yeah, if you want to continue the conversation with us, and I also put in the chat, we have an event tonight if you're free at 7 Eastern, talking about how we navigate the corporate world as a social worker. So we have wonderful social workers who are in business, and they're going to be sharing kind of their knowledge about culture and language, and just to help prepare us even more.
Thank you. Whoever wants to jump in. Eva?
Sure. So I'm pretty much at Rich Social Worker everywhere. YouTube, definitely tons of great videos and information there. And I'm giving you step-by-step instructions on things to do to really kind of own your worth, learn your worth, and translate that. I'm on Instagram, but not that much. The best place, to find me really is either on YouTube, or I've also got a Facebook group called Rich Social Workers, where we have these conversations as well. And I specifically work with social workers who want to get into coaching and consulting and packaging your skills. So if that's something you're interested in, please reach out to me. I think Angelique had posted my information before. Angelique, are you able to do that again?
I am. I will. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but if everyone fills out that networking form, there's a space for you to put your LinkedIn, everything that was shared in the chat, including information from the panelists, including book recommendations, anything that was dropped in the chat that even resembles a link will be shared to everyone in attendance post event. So I encourage everyone to fill that networking form out. Even our panelists would be really helpful, so we could have it all in one place. I'll drop that one more time in there as everyone else finishes. I know Eva's just one in the panelists to talk.
And yeah, and I've also got the website, so richsocialworker.com, so you can follow me there.
Thank you.
For me, I am on Instagram at Tiffany Noel _10, and my information is going to be posted later on too. I can also drop it in the chat. I do have a consulting agency that is in direct partnership with Revolution Financial Management. So if you ever need financial consultation, they're always free. And we do more as well. You can find out more of the services on the Instagram. But I would love to connect with anybody who has just questions, are wanting to learn a little bit more. Feel free, I'm an open book.
Thank you, Tiffany. Michelle?
Hi, everyone again. I can be found on LinkedIn. If you just search my name, it should come up. I also shared my link to it in the chat. Also the co-founder of the Corporate Social Work Collective. We'd love to see you this evening for our event. I added the registration link in the chat as well. And then you can follow us, the Corporate Social Work Collective, on Instagram at Corporate Social Work. But if you want to, find time to chat with me, feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we can find some time in the next few weeks if you want to learn more. I very much believe in lifting others as I climb. I think about all the people that have supported me to get to my point in my career, and I'm definitely all about giving back. So if you want to learn more about how to make the switch, if you want to learn more about anything at all, I'm always happy to chat. So just reach out.
Amazing. And I dropped my information if anyone wants to connect as well. And with that, I just want to say a huge thank you to today's panelists for taking the time to talk about the work you do, where the profession is headed, and how more social workers can make the transition. This is so exciting. It's all about our mindset, right? It's the way we identify first so we can show up and really understand how we can translate our skills into any place that is needed. And a perfect example is, I'm not a social worker in clinical practice. I am an entrepreneur and a business owner that provides consulting services to corporate companies. think of the way that you are going to identify, and that's going to roll off your tongue. So I'm excited to see where this goes. And thank you everyone for joining today. Stay in touch with NASW New York City on Instagram and Facebook. And I hope we all see you at the many other free Social Work Month series events that Angelique worked so hard to put together. So please, please come and celebrate with us. And I especially hope to see you at our 14th Annual Leadership Awards, which is on March 31st at 6 p.m. So have an amazing day. Happy Social Work Month, and to many more, and to making money.
Thank you all.
That part.
Recording.